We're going to talk about the Vols and their bowl destination with Jimmy Hyams and Caleb Calhoun. I'm Dave Hooker, and this is somewhat of a subjective question, but I'm going to ask it anyway, and also ask you for the news aspect of it if we can, Jimmy, in terms of what you think will actually happen. It is today's tough question.
Today's tough question. Take a side. Take a stand. The Dave Hooker Show, a presentation of offthehooksports.com.
All right, Jimmy, I'm having trouble seeing anything but Gator Bowl, and I've tried to dig into that. And I heard you on Sunday morning on, I believe it was, you were in the, I'm sorry, I forget the name of the show. You did a fantastic job, though, with Tim Irwin. I listened to over an hour.
Sunday Sports Sound Off.
Yeah, Sunday Sports Sound Off. And you seem to think Gator Bowl as well. Why do you think Gator Bowl is the eventual destination?
Yeah, I think if you look at the pecking order, there are 5 teams in the SEC ahead of Tennessee. 1 is going to go to the college football playoff. I don't think 2 will. I think a couple go to New Year's Six Bowl. The Florida Citrus Bowl has the next pick. Tampa is a more revered bowl than the Gator Bowl. And so with those 5 teams ahead of Tennessee, I think Tennessee's likely to go to the Gator Bowl. And I think there was the Gator Bowl, Jeremy Pruitt's, I don't know, first or second year, whatever it was. So second year. So I think that's their likely destination. I think it's probably a good spot for them because they do like to recruit Florida. Now, if I had my druthers, I like Tampa a lot more than Jacksonville. I do. But as far as what I think Tennessee's going to do, I think they're going to go to the Gator Bowl. And I think I shouldn't say likely, but I think it's very possible they could play North Carolina and Drake May, which would not be a great matchup considering Tennessee's secondary. However, Drake May could opt out of the game, which makes it a little bit more inviting.
That's true. He could. He has strong ties to North Carolina. Today's tough question brought to you by Andy Mason, AndyMasonRealEstate.com. Best service, best prices in the biz. He'll take care of you. Over 40 years of experience right there in East Tennessee at AndyMasonRealEstate.com. It used to be you'd go into the championship weekend rooting for teams to affect bowl status, and you could have, theoretically, I guess you could have 0 SEC teams make the college football playoff. You could have 1 or you could have 2. Do you see any scenario in which the Vols go up from Gator?
I guess it's possible they could go to Tampa, which used to be the Outback Bowl. Now they're the ReliaQuest. I don't see him going anywhere above that. And one thing might happen is, for example, LSU might say, we'd rather go to a Texas Bowl because we recruit the state of Texas rather than go to a Florida Bowl where they don't recruit as much. So it's possible that could play its way out. I don't think it will, but to your question, it is possible Tennessee could get to Tampa. That would be the highest rung that they could reach. So they're not getting into the Citrus Bowl I don't see any circumstance.
As far as the flip-in, I know Caleb was going to jump in there, but as far as the flip-in, could they potentially fall past the Gator Bowl?
They could. And that fall to me would be the Music City Bowl in Nashville. So it is possible they could end up there. I heard somebody say Liberty Bowl. I don't think there's any chance they go to the Liberty Bowl. But I do think they could end up in the Music City Bowl. Now, they've been to the Music City Bowl more recently than they have been to the Gator Bowl. And folks in the bowls are conscious of that. But also, and you alluded to this earlier, there's a pool of about 5 bowl games, and the SEC basically sets up those matchups. So what Tennessee will do is they'll say, this is our preference. We want to go to Bowl A, then our next preference is Bowl B, and then it's Bowl C. And then the SEC takes it under consideration, but then they put together what they think are the best matchups. They also consider what bowl game you have been to most recently, and they try to avoid that. But could they fall to the Music City Bowl in Nashville? Yes, they could.
Yeesh. Caleb, no offense. I know you're a Memphis guy, Caleb, and I don't mean this to sound mean, but the Music City Bowl in my mind has almost dropped to Liberty Bowl levels. It just, has no appeal to me. Sorry, Caleb, Memphis.
Well, it's actually funny. It's funny you say that because, historically, the Liberty Bowl was above the Music City Bowl because it was more historic. But, you're right, Music City Bowl then kind of surpassed it for a while. But it's Jimmy, I wanted to get to I think Tampa is actually likely for Tennessee more than Jacksonville because let's break this down for a minute.
Okay.
Both both SEC title play teams this weekend, they're both going to New Year's Six Bowls, right?
Yes.
Okay. They're both going. One's going to go to the
or the
playoff.
college football playoff for New Year's Six. Yes.
Yeah.
Okay.
One's going to the college football playoff. The other's going to a New Year's Six.
Yeah.
We could probably bet that. Safest bet if Georgia beats Alabama. We know Georgia's going and Alabama's in a New Year's Six. On top of that, Missouri or Ole Miss is also going to a New Year's Six, right?
Very possible.
Okay, so we're talking Georgia, Alabama, and Missouri all in, and then at that point, Ole Miss or Missouri goes to a. Oh, you're right. It is Tampa. I did the math wrong in my head. For some reason, I thought Tampa was the fifth bowl option. I can't count because I'm thinking a college football playoff, 2 New Year's Six bowls, and then the Capital One Bowl. But if I'm doing my math right, that's the fifth. But you're saying there are 5 teams ahead of Tennessee. So you're right. Yeah. So LSU.
Yeah. So for example, under your scenario, Ole Miss could end up going to the Citrus Bowl, and LSU could go to Tampa.
Right. Okay.
And that puts Tennessee in the Gator Bowl.
Which makes sense. Do you think there's any look at the fact that Tennessee was most recently in the Gator Bowl that might work in Tennessee's favor to maybe go to Tampa?
No, I don't think so. What would work in their favor, I think, is if LSU said we would prefer to play in a Houston Bowl because that's the state we recruit. That could play in their favor if LSU has a strong desire to play closer to home and in a state that it recruits more heavily than Florida. So I think that could work in their favor if that were to occur. So that's why I think it's possible that Tennessee could end up at Tampa. But I think LSU would kind of be the key in that regard.
So
one thing to consider.
Go ahead, Kevin.
Sorry, I just wanted to squeeze this in real quick too. One thing to consider is obviously these invites oftentimes come through fan support. That's the reason in 2001 Tennessee did not get the Orange Bowl invite and Florida did, because Tennessee had nobody show up for the Fiesta Bowl matchup with Nebraska. Guys, I got to be honest. I don't think Tennessee's going to have a lot of people showing up for its bowl game this year because a lot of fans aren't as happy about how the season played out as the way they did last year.
Jimmy, what do you think about that?
I think that Tennessee will not have as many as they went to the Orange Bowl, but I still think they will have a turnout that would be greater than most other teams that are going to be in the from the SEC. They'll have more people than Ole Miss. They'll have more people than LSU. And those are the 2 bowls we're talking about, right? We're not going into the New Year's Six because that doesn't matter. So I think Tennessee would have more fans than the other 2 schools, even though I do think it would be a drop-off from the Orange Bowl.
That's interesting. Do you okay, so here's the way this used to work. For those that don't know, there were bowl committees, individual bowl committees, and like a higher tiered bowl would make their selection. And then the next would have their pick of an SEC, usually East or West school. But nevertheless, it kind of went down the chain. Nowadays, it's much more expedited. It's much more corporate, for lack of a better term, Jimmy, where the SEC just says, hey, this is where you're going. Historically, has that been good for the Vols, you think, or have they been so bad it's tough to tell recently?
I don't know, Dave. I'm not sure if it's been good for them or not. I do think this. I do think that Tennessee typically has played at a higher bowl than the records suggest because the fans follow them. I mean, it was unbelievable in Jacksonville in Butch Jones's second year when they were like 6-6. There were thousands and thousands of Tennessee fans there. And then before the game, out in the parking lot, they established a vol walk for the players to walk. You remember that?
I do.
mean, so I think Tennessee has typically gotten the benefit of the doubt to play in a higher bowl because of their bowl turnout. Now, look, Caleb's right about the Fiesta Bowl years ago, but Tennessee's.
I was at that game, Jimmy.
Yeah. Oh, were you?
Me and my wife, and I think we were the only people from Knoxville in the area.
But I think, it depends on the situation and so forth. But I think that Tennessee would have, they would sell, I don't know, 8,000 to 10,000 tickets wherever they go, I think. But to say whether the SEC that's been beneficial to Tennessee, I don't know the answer to that. But I do think Tennessee's fan support has helped them get into bowls a little bit higher than the record suggests sometimes.
Well, and that's basically what I was going to ask. Is that still a thing? That used to be, I'm sorry to jump in front of you, Caleb. I know you want to get in there. But when I was working with you, or even before that in the 90s, and I followed athletics closely, I knew that Tennessee would typically go to a slot better than they usually would because of their crowd and the road group that would show up. But I don't know that helps Tennessee as much as it did 20 years ago.
I think it still helps. I think we've seen it in recent years. I mean, they were 6-6 under Jones and got to the Gator Bowl.
Well, that's fair.
And they had a ton of fans that showed up. They go to the Tampa. Now, I can't say that they didn't deserve to go to Tampa one year. Maybe they were more likely to go to the Gator Bowl, but Tampa gobbled them up because they knew they'd have a tremendous crowd, and they did a couple of times in Tampa when they played Northwestern for one. Maybe Wisconsin was the other one. But, so I do think that still plays a factor. Now, the other thing that plays a factor in it, they're also conscious of the TV audience. And Tennessee has a brand name. So Tennessee is going to fare well in that regard. When you couple that with the number of fans that actually go to these bowl games, I think that makes them more attractive to the Gator Bowls and the ReliaQuest Bowls of the world.
Caleb, don't kill me. I'm going to slip one more thing in. I had a TV exec one time when I worked for this place with an acronym. They've got a place in Bristol, and they're a terribly run company. But anyway, I had him tell me, he said, the last thing you want is that television to pan up and you don't see a full stadium. He said that actually affects viewership. So it kind of goes hand in hand. I thought that was really interesting. The last thing he wanted to see was empty seats.
Yeah, and that's why I think it makes Tennessee more attractive, because you will have fewer empty seats if you get Tennessee to your bowl game.
Caleb,
your turn.
Yeah, I'm going to shut my mouth, and I'm out of coffee, so I'm not wired anymore. So go for it, buddy. My apologies.
I think what we're missing about this with Tennessee is most of the bowl games that we've covered that they've been in, should we say the last 10 years, the bowl game that they were in was on a season that was an improvement from the year before. So there was a lot of excitement about Tennessee in those moments. I still maintain that this is not one of those years. And so I kind of maintain that this is more comparable, guys, to not just the Fiesta Bowl of 99, but the two Peach Bowls of 2002 and 2003. I'm sure you guys were in Atlanta for both of those. And my guess is I was in the one for when they played Clemson. There was a lot of orange, and most of it was Clemson orange. I just got to be honest with you. And I don't know what the Maryland one was, but I do know Tennessee was not showing up for those bowl games. So it's not just the Fiesta Bowl of 99. And so my pushback on this is I don't think Tennessee fans show up if the year is a downgrade from the previous year and they didn't meet expectations. The one exception being the 2016 year where they went 8-4 and hoped to win the East, but they played that bowl game in Nashville.
Yeah, but Jimmy, couldn't you say that with any opponent that's a little disappointed?
Well, I think you could, but here's the comparison, and I'll go back to this earlier. Will Tennessee draw more people than LSU? Will they draw more than Ole Miss? Not necessarily that they're competing against them. My point is, I think even when Tennessee does not travel as well as usual, it's still more people that will go see LSU or Ole Miss.
Good point.